Good afternoon. I would like to introduce you to Professor Wolfgang Feist. He is a pioneer in sustainable architecture because in 1996 was the founder of the Passive House Institute, promoting the first passive house in Darmstadt, Germany. It was more than 30 years ago, and since then he has been leading the Passive House Institute, and this standard also has grown exponentially, being today the benchmark in Europe. As a researcher, was the head of the scientific monitoring in the European Union project Cost Efficiency Passive House as European Standards. And he participated in the European project Solanova Solar, supported integrated eco-efficiency renovation of large residential buildings and heat supply systems. As a professor, he was chair of the Unit of Building Physics at the University of Innsbruck in Austria from 2008 to 2018. And now is honorary professor in Chinese and Indian universities, where the standard is growing a lot. Now he is going to speak about passive house, ultra high efficiency, the soft path to climate protection. Thank you so much, Professor Feist, for coming here. For us, I think it's a big opportunity to having the founder of Passive House Institute. Welcome to Pamplona, welcome to University of Navarra.
So, all passive houses, what you see here, and you see it's a, well, you can't see from the outside that it is a passive house. I'll come back to that later. Now, let's just talk a little bit about energy efficiency. What you see here, everybody knows, no? What's the way how we keep coffee hot normally. Yeah? Well, if you just have a can of coffee and you place it at some place, it doesn't last very long to be hot. It will lose heat. So then there was a clever engineer, of course, who said, well, if we just replenish the heat which is lost, we can keep the coffee hot. And that's a typical engineering solution for that. And this is what you see if you look on that can in the infrared light. Yes? So you see all these losses, and you also see that we have energy in form of heat supplied to the pot so that it's kept hot. Now that's a typical way we do our energy business almost everywhere. And I could talk about that in my original profession is physics, so we analyzed at a certain point about the energy use in our society, and I can tell you it's about 98% of the energy use which is of this kind in our society. So, and there is a way to do it completely without losing a lot of energy, and you all know about that. That's the passive way. You fill the coffee into the thermos bottle, and it will be hot for 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. It's a good thermos bottle, and you don't need any energy to keep it hot. Yeah, so that's just, in order to keep something hot, you don't need to add energy all the time. You also only need to add that amount of energy which is lost by the system. Yeah, that's simple physics. And the same thing applies vice versa for cooling. You can think about it. I won't go into details right now. It's the same thing. So that is the basic background explained what is a passive house. It's a solution for the energy service heating or cooling without a need to spend a lot of energy. Now, from a viewpoint of physics, you can improve the efficiency as much as you want. you really could improve it in a way that at the end for heating you won't need almost any energy to heat the building. But that's at that point also an economic question. Yeah? So that would mean at the end there are some winters which are a little bit colder and there are others which are not that cold. So you would have to construct the building for the very coldest winter. And then maybe it's only 1 hour every 10 years where this amount of very high efficiency would be needed. And at the end, from a point of economy, that wouldn't be a good idea. So because we have some energy available, I will talk about that later also. So it's always a question how far we want to go with these passive measures. So but it's not the only part. I already told you that 98% of the energy use we have is of this kind. And then you might go very skeptic and say, oh, is that true? Well, I can... let me just tell you another example. We would have to do it example by example, but let's just look at this example. How many of you still remember this CRT monitor? Have used it in their lab or whatever? That's not so many, because a lot of young people also here who never have known about this. So this consumes about 76 watts, that is the measurement here, in order to have a decent display available. And in the time, it's not so far ago, 2003, I discussed it with the engineers in that industry. They were to improve the energy efficiency of these monitors. And then they told me, oh, well, this is not possible. It's impossible because of the laws of physics. Now, I'm a physicist. I know about the laws of physics. From the laws of physics, almost nothing is impossible besides going faster than the speed of light. But a lot of other things, they are not impossible. But they have good reasons to say. They say, well, the electron beam, which is used to write on that screen, that has a kinetic energy, and it's not worth it to recover the kinetic energy of that beam. And that's clear, yeah. That's one of the reasons why you have this very high amount of energy being delivered to that monitor. And that was also the reason why, do you remember, these things got really hot. Yeah? So they were heating your office all the time, also in summer when you didn't need it. So that is why this is old, inefficient technology, which is not used any longer. Or anybody still using CRT monitors? Interesting. Yeah? Interestingly, this is what the guy didn't believe me. We had the better efficient technology. Nowadays, almost everywhere, we have these LCD displays, which base on a completely different kind of how to display what you want to see on the screen. And the energy you need here is just 20 watts. Yeah? So that's a reduction of 74%. Did you know that? It's quite high reduction. It's only 1/4 of the energy these kind of monitors use compared to the old ones. But let me tell you, it's still much too much. Still much too much. How much energy do we need to run this display? 0. It's like the thermos model. You don't need any extra energy besides the light coming to that display in order to display something. Now, some people say, well, that's now because we want to have moving pictures like a movie or video. It's possible. And you see, it is an already available technology, and some of you might already have that kind of technology. It's called electronic ink or electronic paper. And it doesn't consume any energy to have that display. It consumes a little bit for changing the display, but it's measurable. It's just the light you have. It's a range of less than 1 watt. It's available, it's possible to do that. And from a point of physics, it's no problem to. So now, why aren't we using these kinds of monitors everywhere? That's a question I want to give you. Maybe we come back to that later on. And I promise you, it will be not so far in the future, we will be using these kinds of monitors almost everywhere. Yeah? So that's again showing you the question of providing energy services with a kind of energy service, displaying something on the screen. These kinds of energy services, from the very nature of the energy service, you don't need energy to provide that service. Or to get it in another way, the amount of energy you need can be very, very low, extremely low. And that's all about this development increasing energy efficiency. Yeah? We have it also with cars. Yeah? That's an example of a very energy efficient car. Maybe some of you remember that was 2002, it's quite far ago. It's a car which consumed only 1/5 of the energy which a normal conventional car consumes. Yeah? And it's interesting, that is VW who built that car, but they didn't decide to bring it to the market. Quite interesting. Yeah? It's quite interesting. Why didn't they decide to do that? Maybe they wouldn't be in such a trouble than they are right now if they would have done that decision. That's another question again. So, yes, we have these technologies available, and there's sometimes a question, why don't we use them? Well, in the case of buildings, we have been doing this. Yeah? It's also a question why. Well, the answer is quite simple. That is because in the case of building, the building industry, there are a lot of small and medium enterprises, well, also big ones, but a lot of small and medium enterprises. And you always find somebody who will help you to realize such a thing. Yeah? It's easier than with a big automotive industry, which are just a few industrial corporations who do that. So that was the reason why we built, well, it was not 1996, it was 1991, where we built the very first passive house, and I will talk about that later on also a little bit. It's a factor 10 better in efficiency. So it's not, the consumption for heating in this building is not zero, yeah, but it's almost zero. It's what later has been called the nearly zero energy building. Let's look at another example, that is lighting. Artificial light. This is where we came from. Well, one of the interesting effects of modern life is that you always don't remember, you always don't go back to the times when it was very difficult to read, say, a book, because you only have candles for lighting. It's a very inefficient way of lighting. If you would want to illuminate your office in a way we do now, 500 lux, this is what we need. Yeah? That would need 7,000 watts. Would be quite hot in there. It will start to burn. Not working well. We improved the efficiency by this pressurized mantle lamp. So we could really go through the technology of artificial light and see that this technological development was mainly a development for better and better and better efficiency. Yeah? Whereas the pressurized mantle lamp. And then come the incandescent bulb, which is much more efficient, 12 lumen per watt than the pressurized mantle lamp one. Then we had the CFL with 60 lumen per watt, and nowadays we have these LED lights, and the best case nowadays is 140 lumen per watt, which you already can have on the market. So now it's not 7,000 watt, it's 5 watts for the same energy service. Yeah? And there's still some space, yeah? Which can still improve this. Well, so far more, but we can do it up to a efficiency of 200 lumen per watt. So the amount of energy we need to provide a certain energy service is very much dependent on the kind of technology we use for that. Yeah? That's the result. So with a passive house, we have a possibility to do this in the realm of construction of new buildings, but also of renovating old buildings. And there are a lot of opportunities we can gain from doing so. So it's not only conserving energy, it's also an improvement in comfort. I'll go into details a little bit later. It's also a good idea for the investor because it adds durability to the building. It's a win for the building industry because it's adding value. Well, it's the same with the if you remember the thermos bottle. Of course, a thermos bottle is a little bit more expensive than a normal coffee pot. So that is additional value for the producers of the firmest model. Now you can calculate whether this is worth it, and it's an easy calculation, of course it is. It's the same thing here. So we can substitute energy demand, energy consumption by improved quality of the building. That's the point here. Yeah? It's a win for the state. Yeah? I've been discussing it with Navarra government in the morning, and it's quite interesting to see that they have a favor for sustainable development, and it's clear why. Because it's good for resilience, it's good for the tax income of the state. Of course it's good for society because it's improving quality of life. And it's of course good for the environment because we can create climate protection by this. And of course for the future generations. So a lot of win-win-win situations for improving energy efficiency, especially with buildings. And that's also one of the reasons why that has been done all during history. Now there's some question we might discuss later on, and you have these questions. That is, well, if that was going on all the time, why then did we still consume more and more energy all the time? We come back to that later on. So the basic idea for the further development, for the solution of the energy crisis we are in right now is that we improve this efficiency by at least a factor 4. This is a famous book of my colleague Ernst Ulrich von Weizsäcker. I would recommend, if you haven't done it yet, to read that book called Factor 4, or the latest edition is Factor 5. We reduce the amount of energy we need for the same energy service by a factor 4 or 5. So we can improve the energy service. So this is what is maybe needed for the world. We come back to that later on. But at the end, if we improve the efficiency by that factor of 4 or 5, at the end, the total amount of energy we need will only be half of what we need now. And that can easily be provided by a sustainable way of energy generation. So that's the main idea behind that whole process. Now the buildings are quite important in that, and that's another thing which is not so well known. In the European, in the countries of the European Commission, about 1/3 of the total energy consumed is consumed by heating of buildings. Heating of buildings. That was our parts. Well, the light isn't that much. Yeah? Traffic is also quite high. Maybe this is a slide, it's 3 or 4 years old. Maybe now the traffic has grown into the same amount, and maybe the heating is already a little bit declined because we are quite successful in reducing that heating energy demand. But it's the biggest part, if you break down the energy consumption in the European Union. It's the biggest part of the overall energy consumption. So it's important to do something about the energy efficiency for heating. Now, and this is what we can do with the passive house. What you see on the left-hand side, that's an average building in the building stock in Germany. It consumes in the range of 15 liters of heating oil per square meter, or of natural gas per square meter a year. That's still the average in Germany. And they can reduce it by improved architecture, by improved components of a building by a factor of 10. So it's even more than that factor of 4 or 5 in the book of Ernst von Weizsäcker. It's also important to see that with new construction, we'll really have to do this. We'll really have to be better than that factor 4. If we need a factor 4 in average for the reduction of the energy demand, you cannot just have a factor 4 for the applications which can easily do more. Yeah? Because there are some applications where it's not that easy. Yeah? Think, for example, about aviation.
it's not that easy. Yeah? We can reduce the energy demand for aviation, no question asked. But to reach a factor 4 within, say, 20 or 30 years, I'm not so sure that we will be able to do that. But in the buildings, we can do more. And this has been proven in practice. I'll show you some examples also of the proof that it's really working. All the components you need to do that are already available on the market, not available in the laboratory. That was 30 years ago. Available on the market. It's a reliable performance. You can rely on it. You can really design your building. It's also profitable. I'll come back to that. It's comfortable. And what's also important, it's an open concept. So it's no patterns on it. Yeah? Everybody can do. It's but maybe that's one part of the problem that a lot of people think, well, now it's not interesting for me because I want something which is owned by me. Yeah, so it's nobody else is allowed to do it. Competition sometimes is a good thing. Yeah, so if you have others who also can do that, it will improve the overall development. So now you might be curious how that is going to work. Yeah, a factor 10 in efficiency with the buildings. And I'm going to use this example. That's a built university. We are at a university here. So this is a university building, seminary building, which has been built by my friends, architects Feyer and Frankel from AAP Architects in Munich, in Vienna. And I'll use this example to show what is it? How does it work? How can we achieve this very, very deep reduction of energy needed for heating? And the next surprising thing there, or maybe some people would say the boring thing is, but it is really boring. Yeah? It's just the measures which you would think you do. It's the same thing with keeping the coffee hot. So if we want to have the building kept at comfortable temperatures, the problem is that you lose energy. Because the temperature outside in Central European climate, but also here in Navarra during winter season nowadays, they lose energy because it's warmer on the inside. Why is it warmer on the inside? Because we want to feel comfortable. Yeah? That's the reason why it's warmer on the inside. So that's an anthropological constant. Yeah? We need it to have some, at least say 20, 22 or 23 degrees in order to feel comfortable. But when it's on the outside 3 degrees or 0 degrees, you will have from elementary physics, you will have a heat flow from the warmer part to the cooler part. That's elementary physics. And we can reduce that heat flow by better insulation. So I don't have to talk much more about that. You can learn about the details of insulation, how it works, which parts of insulation work better than others, and so on and so on. Well, I just want to add something, that is, most of that, what we call insulation materials, that's all just air. Most of them. There are some improved ones, more expensive ones there. But if you remove the air, it's even better. That's the thermos bottle. But that's a quite expensive thing to do. Well, it's also available on the market right now, so if you don't have a lot of space, you can decide to use vacuum insulation panels. It's available. It's not that expensive. It's still worth it. Yeah? But, well, normally you use air. Now, some people ask, why don't we just use a big cavity of air if the air is so good insulating? Well, the problem with the air is it's also moving. So if you heat the air, you will have what is called natural convection. So we'll have all these convection loops all the time, and you still lose the energy. So this is what an insulation material is all about. It's about to keep the air from moving. Just to stop the air moving. That's all the thing. So you need something to stop the air from moving. And it doesn't depend what it is. It could be any kind of whatever kind of material that stops the air moving. Maybe it's a good idea that that material itself won't have a very high physical thermal conductivity. could be a good idea. But what is most important is that it's not much of material. So that's the reason why these insulated panels are so lightweight, because it's mostly air. So it's just adding air which is kept in a way that it's not moving like that. And that's the very first thing we need to do, improve the insulation. By the way, I won't go into detail on that. By the way, this is also good for summer comfort. It's also insulating if it's hot on the outside and you want to keep it cool on the inside. This is how you can use thermal bottles also. Who knows, you know, in summertime, you just fill in cold tea or something like that, some pieces of ice, and it will be kept cool. Yeah? So insulation is not heating the building, and it's also not cooling the building. Insulation is just separating between the uncomfortable outside situation, whether it's hot or cold, from the comfortable inside situation, where you keep it at comfortable temperatures. So that is why insulation is always good for reducing the amount of energy you need. So next step, we want to do that insulation in a proper way. That is, not having any points where there is less insulation, less than necessary insulation. We call that thermal bridges. We want to reduce these thermal bridges. Next thing is, of course, also windows. They have some influence, so we need improved windows. I'll come back to that later on. One other step I will be talking about tomorrow in a presentation. It has to be airtight. It's simple. I don't have to explain why it has to be airtight. And then on the other side, of course, in a building we are living in, we need fresh air. So what to do if it's airtight and we still need fresh air? Well, we provide that air. Yeah, we have external air in our environment here in Europe. We're quite happy. It's still that the external air has in almost any circumstances, has a better quality than inside air, because the pollutants are inside of the building. So you want to remove the stale air from the inside and bring in fresh air from the outside. Now that's not completely true in some places in China. No? You all know. And I won't talk about that right now. It's also something which is interesting, and we have done some research on that, but let's just assume for the moment that the external air is healthy air. So we bring it in, and then we still would have cold air coming into the building. Well, we use heat recovery, so that's why the heat recovery system comes in. So these are the 5 steps how to build passive houses in winter cold climates, like yours here or like ours in Central Europe, and a lot of climates in the world are winter cold climates. Well, if it comes to summer hot or especially summer humid climates, there are some extra measures which are also important, and we could talk about it, but I won't do now because I don't want to talk more than 3/4 of an hour. Well, now the next question what comes up then is, well, it's expensive. What does it cost? And I'm not going through that whole calculation right now. I'll just show you that improving the insulation at the end will result in much lower total costs than providing the energy from any kind of source we have nowadays. Doesn't depend on what kind of source you try to use. So improving the insulation, but of course there are some costs for improving the insulation. But and these costs have to be financed. So how do you finance these kinds of costs? Well, what you normally do, you go to the bank and you try to get some loan from the bank, and then they will give you an interest rate. You have to calculate what you will pay on an annual basis each year again for that loan. And we can calculate that and compare that with the alternative, and the alternative is the alternative to just pay for the heat. Yeah? And then at the end, if you look at the difference, it's profitable. So yeah, this is a profitable way to save a lot of energy. So let's come to the windows. What you see on the left-hand side, that's a typical conventional window, like we have did for a couple of decades right now. But even earlier, it's also a history. Even earlier, there have been only single glazing being used and much less sophisticated window frames. But it was sometimes was I don't know who had that very bad idea to use the timber in the way you see here, because that gives you a very thick part of the window frame here. So you have only a small part of the transparent area of the window. That's the important part of why do we build windows? Because we want to have a transparent part. We want to have an aperture. You want to look out, or you want to see the sun, or you want to have the sun shine coming in, or the light coming in. So yes, that's the first thing. Just have the frame 90 degrees changed, like you see here. So it's less area covered by the frame. Add another window pane. Now again, yeah, we have two spaces of. In this situation, it won't be air. It will be a noble gas, argon normally what we put in. And latest technology here is to use a so-called low emissivity coating. That's an interesting technological development. I know the two guys who did that development in the early 70s in the last century. It's quite interesting to see that application. It's something we also do in the thermos bottle. That's what you normally do nowadays with windows. And now we can reduce the overall heat loss coefficient of a window from 1.4 to less than 0.8. That's what these improved windows do. Now, somebody might think, no, that's not so much. It's not that factor 10 we have in insulation. Well, but in fact, it's even more because the window also gains solar energy. So if you look at the heating demand, you get a solar gain from the window. And these solar gains, they are higher than the losses you have with that type of window, at least in the climate we are in here during winter. During summer we are also higher here. Yeah? That's a problem of overheating during summer, that you have a lot of solar gains during the summer, so that's what the shading comes in. But with these windows, we get a net gain in your climate here, or also in the climate of Central Europe. You get a net gain also in winter. So that's the overall energy savings we have with going from the old windows to the new windows is also more than a factor 10. It's going from a net loss window to a net gain window. Okay, so and there are lots of windows now available on the market. There's also quite interesting thing that it's not that difficult to build. Well, okay, so who has never done it? It's always when you come. That's something we do at the Passive House Institute. We help companies to develop their own passive house window. And these are some of those. Now there are more than 300 types of these passive house windows available almost everywhere. It can be small and medium enterprises who produce these types of windows, and can be all types of windows. It can be aluminum windows, it can be plastic windows, it can be wooden windows, it can be with some extra insulation. Others just use kind of air spaces for the insulation, and so on. So lots of solutions in order to reduce the energy loss of a window frame. It can be done by small and medium enterprises. Also doors, and so it's available on most of them. So now the last topic where you might have asked yourself, well, this is really so good idea. Why do we need ventilation? Why? It's not my slide. It's a slide of a colleague at the University of Innsbruck, Rainer Fluger. This slide is just answering the question: why do we need ventilation? Of course, we need ventilation. So how can we do efficient ventilation? Well, a heat exchanger is a very simple thing to have. Yeah? It's very easy to understand how such a heat exchanger works. You have the extract air which is still warm. You also might think, I don't want to confuse you, but you also might think about the summer situation where this air is cooler than the outside air. And it will also work the recovery system. So let's think about warm extract air coming from the kitchen or from the bathroom. And we have fresh air from the outside, which is cold. So now what we do is quite simple. We have the extract air, the warm air, going through that channel up here. And in counterflow, we have the fresh air going through the other channel, which is completely separated. And then we will have heat flow between the warmer side and the cooler side. And we will regain most of the energy. So it can be up to 98, well, it could be even more. It's just a question of the area you use for the heat recovery. And that's again an economic question. At the end, if the heat exchanger would be as thick as this room, it's not economically interesting. Yeah? So we just decide to have it. Most of the heat exchangers we have now, use now, are in the range of 82 to 88%. So that's in that range where you get decent sizes of these heat recovery system. And that means that you recover more than a factor 5 of the energy which gets lost otherwise. When there is always the question, well, now you have to move the air. Yes, okay, you need some fans, and of course the fans need energy to operate them. But the energy we need to operate a fan nowadays is very low. So it's about 1/10 of what you need, what you would need for heating the air. So it's almost better to move air than to heat air. Yeah. So and now of course the electricity has to be produced, and if you produce it in a not sustainable way, which most of the electricity is still being produced by, it will still reduce the primary energy by a factor 4 to 6. So that's how these heat recovery systems work. So that was a part of a 4-dwelling experimental building we built in 1991. I already talked about that. It's now almost 30 years old, and we did some research on the longevity of the components in that building. I won't talk about that very much again because I just want to give you some ideas what you can do. But what we also did after 25 years, we added some photovoltaics. Well, at the time we built that house, photovoltaics was still quite expensive, so it was not worth investing in that kind of electricity generation. But that has changed now. So now photovoltaics is an interesting way of producing renewable energy. It may still be a little bit more expensive than the conventional way, but if we use the electricity efficiently, if you only use half of electricity you normally use, it's worth it. So we added some photovoltaic panels at that point. And that makes it possible to have a building which is at the end producing more electricity than it uses. So that is what often is called a net zero building. Now I from a scientific point of view, this concept of net zero, no, it's only interesting in the first phase of the development. But later on, and that's what I want to show you here, later on you will realize, well, there's still a problem remaining, and that is this yellow part, that is the electricity produced by the photovoltaic panels. It's actually the measurement, monthly sums of the photovoltaic electricity produced at this place by these solar panels. But there are other ones also on the roof, so we covered almost every part where we could do. That's the produced electricity. And then what you see here is the electricity we use, electricity we use for light and for refrigerator, computers, and so on. That's this green part. And then we have now we have a heat pump for heating. This is the electricity for the heat pump, and that's the electricity for the domestic hot water. Now what you see here, it's very easy to cover the total demand during summertime. Not a big deal. And we can even have more electricity produced during summertime than we need. So this is easily a net zero building. Yeah? We produce much more electricity than we use, even if you add up all these parts in the winter time, then the photovoltaics won't be enough to provide the electricity, even for the simple things like light and refrigerators. Yeah? And not to speak about domestic hot water and heating. So this is what you see here. That's a problem of this net zero energy concept. It won't work at the end because you still will need some energy during that winter time. Now some people think, well, we solve that with seasonal energy storage. I just talked about seasonal. I just say energy storage. And we make progress in energy storage. It's getting less expensive with each day, one could say. But when we normally talk about energy storage, we talk about things like domestic hot water tank or batteries or things like these, which can easily give you a energy storage for a few hours a day, 2 days, 3 days, even a week. And you will use them, if it's a week, 50 times in the year. So that is something you could do. Yeah? This is also what you do with a battery in an electric car. You use it every day. Yeah? So it's several times a year. But now if it comes to that side that you use that storage only once a year, and this is what happens with the seasonal energy storage. Yeah? You can use the storage only once a year because there's no energy coming into the storage during all that time. So you have to store the energy during the summer, and you have to have it during the whole winter time. Yeah, and that's expensive. It's clear. Yeah, if you use a storage not 50 times a year, that is 50 times the energy it can store, but only once a year. Yeah, that's a factor 50, almost factor 50 in cost. Yeah, and that makes this seasonal storage. Well, we can't go too deep into that. There can be much deeper further discussion about these things. Having seasonal energy storage is one of the still unsolved problems. It's in principle possible, and we can do that as long it's expensive. Yeah, we can do that as long as it's not too much of the energy demand. So this is now just with this very efficient building. It's just in the range of 5% of the ordinary purchased energy. So yes, that's possible to pay for. Now, maybe, this is just my opinion, maybe in the future we will still use not renewable energy for these parts. Small amount that we still will use, and maybe it would still be less expensive, would be easier to remove at the end the carbon dioxide. But it's another question. In principle, we can do this as long as it's not too much. But if we now go back to a less efficient construction, so this is the comparison, that's the measurement results in the passive house. Now let's remove this extra insulation, let's remove the heat recovery system, let's remove the triple pane windows and so on. So that will be the remaining demand without all these things. And then the total energy you would need for seasonal storage, well, that's a quite huge amount of energy. That will come to a quite huge storage you would need. That has been done. Yeah, there are some research projects where we have equipped buildings with a 40 cubic meters hot water tank in order to provide seasonal heat. But you can also imagine what the implications on architecture and so on are if you want to do that. And of course, it's really, really expensive. Yeah? So that's why using renewable energy, come back to that, fits very well together with improving the energy efficiency. So with improved energy efficiency, you can do 100% renewable energy, not just net, but 100% renewable energy. Without the improved efficiency, you have that large gap during the winter where it's very, very expensive to have a seasonal storage. And again, this has already been realized. So this is an example from Germany where the city of Frankfurt has built this office building. There are some results also from that already available. Now you see, it's a very large photovoltaic panel. It's not only on the building, it's also on the garage. So one could discuss that. Well, in principle, it's possible to do so. What I think it's a better idea not to have that storage and these things in the building itself, but maybe that's still something we will do with the energy provider, with the guys running the grid. It's maybe much less expensive, but it's possible to do that, and it's nowadays you could do it as long as it's very efficient. Now let's come back to how is that going to help us solving the climate problem. And what you see here, it's again measured values of the energy consumption in this situation in Germany. And this line here, that's the total energy, primary energy consumption in Germany. And what you see here, that total primary energy consumption beginning in 1990, or let's start, better not to come into strange discussions, let's start in the year 2000. This general primary energy has been reduced during all the time during the last decades. And then we added also renewable energy. This is what you see here, the dark green part. It's adding renewable energy. Now the interesting thing is, this is what you normally don't see in the normal applications. That is, that our energy services, they had been growing. So this is the overall growth of energy services measured in the value. It's the economic growth. So all this economic growth in Germany was provided by improving the energy efficiency. Yeah? And that economic growth, that was the reason why we had this prognosis of very large demand of energy. That was why it was, some people thought that it's necessary to build 3 times the amount of nuclear reactors which are already existing in Germany. When was we talk about that? Because the energy demand will rise that much. Now, well, yes, the energy services have been going up, but the efficiency has been improved. So, and if we go on with improving that efficiency, we can reduce the energy demand further and further. We can add additional renewables, and that's a way at the end to get totally rid of the not renewable part of the energy production. So I'm stepping over that because that's not here. It's an example of a passive house being built in China. These are some examples of other components. I have already talked about the window component. We have also these components for the heat recovery systems and the component for the combined heat pump systems for providing cooling, heating, and domestic hot water, and the ventilation, balcony separation parts, and these things. These are all developments which can help the small and medium enterprises to introduce energy efficient components for the general market. And that's something which has been growing in the past years quite a lot. What do we also do? We help architects and engineers in that design of a very energy efficient building. Yeah? So we have these informations freely available on the internet, but also provide these courses about the passive house. So this is a slide I'm just citing from a friend in China. This is Mrs. Zhang Zhaoling. She is now working in the Chinese certification unit, and she was a former officer in the Mohud, that's the building ministry of the central government in China. And she gave a presentation in the last Passive House conference about the improvement of the lives of farmers due to the use of improved energy efficiency using passive house construction. And I'll just show you, I won't go through all of that, but it's very interesting. Improving the farmer living inside environment, help the farmer to get rid of poverty. This is a very important goal in China. And it's also interesting to see that the Chinese government wants to do that because it's a big problem that so many people want to leave the rural sides and go to the cities. So if we can help them at the place, can improve their living conditions, it might be easier for them to stay where they are. They can reduce the heating costs. They can obtain property for future generations. They obtain income from the development of their passive housing, reduce their labor intensity, alleviate their pain and suffering. It's just citing her. Yes, that's a very important and interesting fact that with doing things like that, we don't just save energy, we can help in the development of these rural parts, especially here in China. These are some examples from Chinese developments. Their passive houses have been built, some of them with the help of European experts, others with original Chinese architects. So they are quite, some people say that in China they can't do really high quality. I don't agree with that. They can do it, and we have seen that. This is one of the latest examples. Well, you will see a lot of very high-rise buildings in China nowadays. Most of them are not energy efficient, so that's a big problem. Well, the hope is that at least some of the governments, they have realized that will create a future problem. So this is one of the first passive house developments in China. That's 1 million square meter of passive house already completed. This is not a model, it's already completed. It was completed this year, and it was been possible to visit during the last International Passive House Conference. And now that's a presentation of the guy who is in charge for the building standards in China. This is Xu Wei from the Chinese Architecture and Building Regulation Institution. And in this presentation he showed something like this, and I'm going into that because that's very interesting. That's one of the first times I have seen that from a governmental official. No, I don't have this slide, seems that way, but I can show it here. So these are the different paths for future development. So the path we will be in the future development is dependent on the decisions we take now. That's an easy thing, you all know. Yeah? The decisions you do now will somehow determine how you will live in the future. Yeah? It's clear. Yeah? So if you buy this car, it will be different from if you buy the other car. Yeah? So if you marry this girl, it will be different from if you marry the other one. Yeah? So these are well-known facts. So we can now decide to just go on with the business as usual. That's the business as usual development. And yeah, the Chinese know, and we know, if we see that is nowadays 2020, it will be double the consumption of energy in buildings in the next 30 years. And if that happens in China, there will be a lot of hope of tackling climate change then. Yeah? That's a huge problem. So now we realize, well, if we decide now to go, say, a moderate path of improving efficiency, we'll land at the yellow path, or a more, he calls it aggressive, I would say, and I discussed it with him and he agreed, it's a high commitment. Yeah? If we have a high commitment to improve the efficiency of new construction, we can turn it around and we will reduce the energy demand by a factor of 3 in the next 30 years. It's interesting. Yeah? This is official stuff from China. So the Chinese and well, still these decisions have still not completely been done, but they are already on a better path than the blue one. That is how I can say. Yeah? So they are introducing new legislation going to the higher efficiency paths, and they orient these decisions on the European legislation. That's interesting. The only difference is that they are really doing it, and we in Europe, we are somehow hesitating to really doing it. Yeah. So, it's not completely clear that it will happen, but it's interesting to see that there are considerations about these types of development. So, that's my last slide. The former slide was about the last conference and two of the presentations we had there. I just want to show you that will be the upcoming conference next year, international conference. It will be in Berlin this time, and we have a call for papers now running. Maybe it's quite interesting for you and also for some of you from the university here in Navarra, because what I have already seen is that you are doing a lot of very interesting stuff here, with going into circular economy and all these things. That might be quite interesting for presentation at the conference. Just to give you one hint, what we want to see at that conference are really in practice monitored solutions. So not just some weird ideas, but really proven concepts of how you can improve efficiency, or how you can apply circular economy, or how you can use renewable energy in a way that will reduce the problem of climate change. Yeah, so thank you very much, and I'm open for your questions.